introduce Kirk Patterson, Port Officer for the OCC for many years, not sure how many, but for 3 decades he's lived in Japan and has the distinction of being the first foreigner to circumnavigate Japan. He makes a living supporting visiting super yachts. We don't have a super yacht, but we are thoroughly looking forward to meeting him in the flesh when we finally do get to Japan, which is very much on our cruising itinerary. So it's now 11:05. We're up to 24 people. Kirk, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me okay on your end?
Kirk, I can both hear you very clearly and I can see you very clearly, so all yours.
Okay. Great. Okay, thanks so much. Thanks to you for joining in. As the title says, I'm going to speak a bit about the wonders of cruising Japan. I really think Japan is a great cruising ground. I would say it's one of the best in the world, but I haven't been to many places in the world. But I certainly think it should be on world cruisers should try to visit list. And I'll try to explain a bit about why I think Japan is a great place to cruise and give a bit of information about how to cruise Japan. First, a bit of self-introduction. As Simon mentioned, I've lived in Japan for a long time. I'm from Canada, but I've spent most of my adult life in Japan, working in various management positions in Tokyo. My last position, I was president of a university in Tokyo. But that I'd always wanted to become an offshore sailor, but I never had sailed. I spent too much time working in Tokyo. So at the age of 54, I decided to retire, move back to Canada to become a sailor, but I never sailed in my life. And I bought Silk Purse and I set out to try to become a sailor. Silk Purse is a 40-foot steel cutter. I spent 4 years learning how to sail her and sort of learning how to maintain her, maintenance not being one of my strong suits. I spent 4 years going up the British Columbia, Alaska coast. And along the way, somebody told me that no foreigner had ever circumnavigated Japan. My initial goal had been to go from Canada to Mexico, South Pacific, maybe around the world. But then when I heard that no foreigner has circumnavigated Japan, I said, well, I'll do Japan first and then do the rest of the world. So I decided to go to Japan, left in 2012, and first went to Hawaii, was a 3,000 mile passage in 27 days. It was a pretty good passage, got the trade winds and had a pretty fast run, no major adventures. And I got to Hawaii and I had a few repairs to do. By the time I finished the repairs, typhoon season started. So I figured, well, I guess I'm stuck in Hawaii for a while. So I became a bartender. I had never bartended a day in my life, but I went to bartending school and got some bartending gigs. And so some of the students from my university were delighted in coming to see me bartending and posting photos on Facebook about how the dean had fallen to the depths of being a bartender. But life in Hawaii was good. And I considered staying in Hawaii, but then I decided to continue on to Japan. 2013, did a 4,000 nautical mile, 37-day passage from Honolulu to Hakodate in northern Japan. The first half of that 37-day passage was heaven, and the last half was hell for a variety of reasons. But I got to Hakodate in one piece. The boat was still floating and I was still alive. And so I got to Japan, and then it was time to start the circumnavigation. So I spent 3 years doing the circumnavigation. And in that process, I really learned what a great place Japan is to cruise. And there's a lot of wonderful things about cruising Japan. The people is the number one thing. All foreign cruisers who come to Japan say the best thing about Japan is the people. The people are great, and Japanese hospitality is wonderful. The scenery is beautiful and diverse. I came from Canada, and the Canadian West Coast, Alaska scenery is beautiful, but it's all the same. It's forests and mountains and forests. Japanese scenery is very diverse. Never get bored with the scenery in Japan. Great history and culture, excellent moorage options, and a lot more. So let me visually show you some of those wonders. First, about the people. I met a lot of wonderful, helpful, kind people throughout my 3-year circumnavigation. The first guy that I met was this guy on the right, Mr. Sasa-san, who himself is a sailor and was planning on circumnavigating the northern island of Hokkaido the same time that I was going. So he took me under his wing and helped teach me about the unique aspects of how to cruise Japan, how to find moorage spots, how to make the most of one's time in Japan, and so on. This photo was taken in a port on the northern side of the island Hokkaido, and it's a fishing port. It was famous for scallops and harvesting scallop farms off the shore. The gentleman on the left was shucking scallops for us, and he ended up giving us countless bags of scallops, and Sasa-san and I feasted on those breakfast, lunch, and dinner for about a week. So that was a great way to start my cruising in Japan. Wherever I went, a lot of people would come down and say, well, let's show you around the town and let's go drinking. And then after drinking, let's go back to my boat for more drinking. So this was one such episode on the northwest shore of the main island of Honshu. Further down along the west coast of Japan, I was walking around this very sleepy little fishing village, and this woman on the right came up to me and said hello, and I asked her if there was a public bath in the town, and she said, no, there's no public baths here. She asked why. I said, well, I'm on that sailboat over there, but that's okay. I don't have to have a bath. And when I wandered back to my boat, the gentleman in the photo was there in his car waiting for me, and he said, my wife said that you want to have a bath, so please come to our home. So off we went to their home, and the bath was drawn, the fresh towels were laid out for me. I came out of the bath, and there's a full deluxe dinner there waiting for me. They apologized for being just a few things, but it was a glorious feast of things from their garden and fish that they got trading for their vegetables and so on. It was a marvelous time learning all about their lives in the village. And I actually went a second time to see them a couple of years later. This is now the far south of the southern islands of Japan. This gentleman runs a small restaurant on the westernmost point of Japan, an island called Yonaguni. He gave me a driving tour of the island, had me over to his restaurant every night for dinner and beer, and introduced me to his family, including his grandson here. Just a wonderful time. Almost thought of setting roots on that island as well. It was such a great place. Going on, this couple in the photo here, they're actually cruisers. There are some Japanese cruisers that sail around the world offshore. This was one such couple. I met them when they were cruising in Canada. And we became friends there. They did a full circum-Pacific passage over 4 years. And we got back to Japan around the same time. And I went to visit them in their hometown and out for some beers and more. And talking about beers and more, in the Seto Inland Sea, the inland sea between the 3 major islands of Japan. I was invited up to a moon viewing party and bribed with lots of bottles of beer, friendly people. On the same island, at this point, I decided I was going to stay in Japan a little bit longer to write a cruising guide to Japan. And people said, well, you should come, why don't you come live on our island? This island called Tsuoshima in the Seto Inland Sea. And I said, well, I'd love to live here. It's a lovely island, but there's no place to moor my boat. The gentleman in the white shirt in this photo happens to be the mayor of that island. And he said, well, we'll build you a dock. So come back next year and the dock will be ready for you. So I arrived a year later after finishing the circumnavigation. They had built a 16-meter dock for me. They found a lovely farmhouse with a great ocean view for me to rent for $150 US a month. So I started living on that island. It's a lovely island. And the dock is now available for OCC members if you get to Japan. So that's a bit about the people. I could do a whole presentation just on the people. But let me now turn to the scenery. As I said, there's tremendous variety of scenery in Japan. The north is very rugged. The northern island of Hokkaido is very rough and rugged and wild, a bit similar to Canada, Alaska in some ways. Beautiful sunsets. It's far north, so the sun sets late. Some great, all through Japan, of course, the ocean is beautiful, but there's a lot of interesting inland exploration too. These are some marshlands in the northern island of Hokkaido. You could walk through these marshlands for days and days. Rice paddies throughout Japan, beautiful places to stroll. West coast of the main island of Honshu, there's extensive area of sand dunes. You can explore the sand dunes. You can even rent a camel, go for a camel ride in the sand dunes. This doesn't show up well in the photo, but this island, halfway between Korea and Japan itself, island of Tsushima, and this bay you see here, dozens of islands and inlets and peninsulas, a great place for cruising and exploring. It's a really magical place that feels like you've fallen off the planet into paradise. It's just magical, delightful spot. I spent a week cruising through here and I could have stayed much longer. Western Japan, beautiful ocean vistas all over the place. Rocky islands off the west coast of the western part of Japan. The southern islands of Japan, people often refer to them as the Okinawa Islands, beautiful scenery, beaches. This is the southernmost point of Japan, island of Haturama, with beautiful beaches. There's another island of the southern chain of islands, more beautiful beaches, very tropical, very different from the rugged, rough northern island of Hokkaido. There's an island called Yakushima, which is a UNESCO site, towering waterfalls throughout the island, 1,500-year-old cedar trees, amazing place to explore and to go hiking. The Seto Inland Sea, it's beautiful scenery. This is the island of Tsuoshima where I started living, where they built a dock for me. This is the island that I was living for a while. Beautiful scenery there, looking out over the Seto Inland Sea. So on to history and culture. Many of you may not know much about Japanese history, so very, very briefly, Japan's history goes back about 1,500 years, written history at least. It started really in the Kyoto area, central part of Japan, and then expanded west and south and east and north to cover what we now consider Japan. The real height of Japanese culture was what they call the Heian era, which is sort of 800 AD to about 1200 AD. Perhaps the most important thing that happened in Japanese history was that it cut itself off from the outside world for about 250 years, from roughly 1635 to 1868. For 250 years, it was almost completely cut off from the outside world. And that really shaped a lot of Japanese culture, what happened before that, during that, and after that. So with that as a very quick synopsis, some of the things that you visually see as you cruise Japan. See lots of shrines and temples, Shinto shrines, Buddhist temples. This is on the west coast of Japan, probably the second most important Shinto shrine in Japan. You know, thousands of temples. On the island of Shikoku, there is a pilgrimage trail of 88 temples that you can go to. So the people here in the white jackets are pilgrims on this 88 temple pilgrimage tour. Some people walk it. Most people now go by tour bus. Quite a few foreigners do this. It's on my bucket list to do someday. These are the steps up to a temple called Kompira-san. Kompira is the name of my consulting company. Kompira is the god, the Buddhist god for protecting seafarers. But strangely enough, the temple for the god that protects seafarers is up at the top of a mountain, about 800 steps up the mountain. And you can't even see the ocean from there. So I'm not sure why the god that protects seafarers is at the top of a mountain away from the ocean, but that's what it is. But all seafarers make the pilgrimage up the steps to visit that temple. More famous site, many of you may have seen this photo, the Miyajima Shrine, the famous Shinto Torii gate. It was a special pleasure for me to cruise by in front of this in my own boat. Another small Shinto gate in the ocean. I mentioned earlier, I showed that map with the island between Korea and Japan and the inlets and the islands of the peninsulas. Well, this is one spot inside that bay, a free dock, just where a Shinto shrine is, a Shinto shrine to another sea god. And there's a long row of Shinto torii gates leading to that shrine. Legend has it that the underwater sea palace for the Dragon King is just at the foot of this chain of torii gates. As one cruises Japan, one will learn a lot about maritime history and how Japan became or didn't become a maritime culture and a maritime power. This is a half-scale replica of a Japanese sailing vessel that traded up and down the west coast of Japan from the northern island to central Japan and really fostered the development of the economy in western and northern Japan from about the 15th to 18th centuries. This is the entrance to a little tiny fishing port on the west coast of Japan. Its history goes back to at least the 7th century. In the ancient chronicles of Japan, this little port called Fukuura is mentioned in the ancient chronicles as a good natural port to leave from or arrive to when going to and from Korea. It's a lovely natural little harbor. This building you see here is the first Western style lighthouse in Japanese history, built in around 1870 something. And this lighthouse is still functioning today. It used to be a very, very important port in its day, but now it's a very sleepy little depopulating village. This is one of perhaps the best top three places to visit if you're cruising Japan. It's a little port called Ine, and it's a bay, and the entire bay is lined with these houses called funiya, or boat houses. In olden days, fishermen parked their small fishing boats underneath the houses, and they lived up above. They're still actively used today, although the fishermen, their boats are much bigger, so that they moor the fishing boats outside in front of the houses, but the fishermen still live in the houses today. It's a lovely sight, and as you arrive and you pass by the 350 houses along the shore, it's just magnificent. Of course, Japan is famous for its samurai. There are samurai castles throughout Japan. This is a samurai castle in Matsuyama in west central Japan. This is a samurai. It's a samurai princess. We think of samurai as men, but there were a few women who were samurai. This samurai princess, by the name of Tsuruhime, her father was a samurai who was killed in battle. She took over the family samurai title and defended the family against an invading clan. And legend has it that she killed the head of the enemy clan and saved her clan and the island community. But then later, her fiance was killed in battle, and she drowned herself in the ocean right in this spot where they built a statue to her. She was apparently very petite. The armor that she wore is in a museum right near where the statue is. And there were samurai, but there were also pirates. There were a lot of pirates back in the 12th, 14th, 16th centuries, especially in the Seto Inland Sea area. This is a museum dedicated or focused on the most famous of those pirates, the Murakami pirates. But beyond pirates, there's also a lot of other interesting things, the beautiful gardens to see, festivals to partake in. This is the festival on an island, the Seto Inland Sea. The festival has about 1,000-year history. I mentioned that Japan was closed off to the outside world for 250 years. I said it was almost closed off to the outside world. The one exception was the Dutch had a trading port on the island of Dejima in Nagasaki. And so Dejima was the Western world's window on Japan, was Japan's window on the Western world. They've now recreated the Dutch trading community at Dejima for tourists to go in. It's a very well developed museum. As part of the Japanese isolation from the outside world, it banned Christianity. And some of you may have seen the movie Silence or read the novel Silence. After Japan ended its isolation period, Christianity was then allowed to be practiced. So the hidden Christians, the people who had been practicing Christianity secretly, came out of hiding, and they built many shrines, or built many Catholic churches or Protestant churches in some cases. And these are all throughout Western Japan. This is an interesting scene here. St. Francis Xavier Catholic Church towering above a Buddhist cemetery. This is another church built by the hidden Christians after they came out of hiding in the late 19th century. Now, I mentioned before the Okinawa Islands of southern Japan. Okinawa is now part of Japan, but for most of its history, that island chain, which is known as the Ryukyu Island chain, the Ryukyu Islands, the Ryukyu Kingdom was a separate country, separate from Japan, and was a trading entrepot of trading between Japan, Korea, China, Southeast Asia, and so on. Very prosperous in its day, 13th, 14th, 15th centuries, gradually overtaken by Japan from 16th to 18th centuries. But this culture in the Ryukyu Islands is still unique. The people there still consider themselves primarily to be Ryukyu, not Japanese. Many foreign cruisers, when they come to Japan, they skip through the Ryukyu Islands, but I think that's a waste, and I think the Ryukyu Islands are worth spending some slow cruising time. And there's all sorts of fun things. Japan culture is not all serious things. There's lots of fun things about Japan as well, the people and their lives and what they do. These are some Japanese people enjoying some tugboat rides. There's an island off the west coast of Japan called Sado Island, and tourists can go there and take a tour in these little tugboats through the harbor. So those are some of the real reasons why you want to cruise Japan: the people, the scenery, the history and the culture, and so on. But what makes Japan possible and relatively easy to cruise is there are lots of moorage options. Japan has about 3,000 ports, and there are massive breakwaters in front of all of the ports. So they're very well protected. And there's also no crime in Japan. I on Facebook and the various cruising sites that I read, people are talking about their outboards are stolen and their dinghies are stolen and this and that. And I keep saying, well, just come to Japan. I haven't locked my boat since I arrived in Japan. So, I cruised 6 years in Japan, and I don't even know where the lock is anymore. Nor the key. There's zero crime in Japan. The only thing that's ever happened to me, and it was really terrible, while I've been cruising in Japan, is sometimes people would sneak onto my boat and leave presents of beer and sake and fruit and vegetables. Terrible, but I managed to live with that. But there are lots of moorage options in Japan. They're free in most cases, or very cheap. They're very convenient. You can moor in any port in Japan, almost always for free, except near the big cities. And they're everywhere. So there's probably, in most places, there's a fishing port where you can pull in every 10, 20, 30 miles. So you're never more than a leisurely half-day cruise from a good place to pull in. The most common place to moor in Japan is in fishing ports. You can pull into any fishing port and you could almost always find a place to moor. I've never once not been able to find someplace to tie up for the night when I pull into a fishing port, and 99% of them are free. It used to be more difficult 20, 30, 40 years ago. But with the declining fishing industry, there's more open space in the fishing ports, and they're happy to have the tourists come and visit. So this is a fishing port that I tied up at an island off the northwest part of Hokkaido. I mentioned breakwaters. There's massive breakwater. This is in a port in southeast Hokkaido, massive breakwaters. Once you're inside there, you're very safe and secure, really even during a typhoon usually. This is that port that I mentioned that goes back in the 7th century in the Chronicles of Ancient Japan. You can see my boat, Silk Purse. I did a little parallel parking job behind some fishing boats there to snug into the corner of the harbor. The fishing port just to avoid the nets along the dock. This is one of the islands through the Ryukyu Islands, the Okinawa Islands in the south of Japan. I stopped here for a night and ended up spending 2 weeks there. Up in northeastern Japan, where there was the tsunami 2011, the ports are still being rebuilt. And so it was at least a bit harder to find a place. I really had to struggle to squeeze into this particular fishing port that's still being rebuilt after the tsunami. Now I understand most of the ports are rebuilt, and so it's much easier now for cruisers to find space there. Now on to sea stations, what they call in Japanese umi no eki, or sea stations. These are what I refer to as mini marinas. 1 boat, 5 boats, maybe 10 boats max, run by the local municipalities or the local fishing cooperatives for cruising boats to come and visit a moorage for a few days, maybe up to a week. And there's about 100 of these throughout Japan, and they're very good facilities and free or very cheap. This is the northernmost port of Japan, island of Wakkanai. This is Silk Purse moored at a sea station in the western Japan. You can see the castle up on the hill overlooking the port. This is another sea station, island of Shikoku, town called Takamatsu. From here, it was a 10-minute walk right to downtown for restaurants, supermarket, 1-minute walk away, laundromat, 5-minute walk away, and it was $5 US a night. This is the sea station at the island of Yuge, which is in Seto Inland Sea. This, in my opinion, is the best sea station, really the best moorage spot in all of Japan. The docks are new. They have power and water on the dock. On shore, right by the docks, there's a clubhouse with Wi-Fi and washing machine and a shower, a place to drop off your garbage. Within a 10-minute walk, there are 2 supermarkets, several restaurants, a hot spring bath, and it's about $1 a night to moor here. And it's also very well protected in typhoons. This is another great sea station. This is to the left from this photo is where the statue of the samurai princess is. And this is the longest floating dock in Japan. Also a great sea station moorage spot, less than $1 a night, and with very interesting cultural sites for sightseeing in the area. There are marinas in Japan. There's about 70 marinas that take visiting boats, and generally excellent facilities. And by developed countries' pricing, they're cheaper than what you would find in most parts of the developed world. This is the northern island of Hokkaido. This is the northernmost marina in Japan. Marina along the west coast of Japan. There's a little marina run by a fishing cooperative in the west of Japan. See no problem finding a space there. I mentioned before the Dutch trading post that was Japan's window on the world from the 7th and 19th centuries. Well, there's now a small marina there called Dejima Wharf. So I felt especially happy, being a student of Japanese history. I was very happy to take my foreign boat and to moor at the Dejima Wharf. That was historically, culturally very significant for me. This is a very well protected marina on the east coast of Japan. I say well protected, it's well protected from weather, but not from tsunami. This marina was wiped out by the tsunami, 2011. So the docks here are all new after the tsunami wiped it out. This is the marina where my boat is now. It's hard to see from the photograph, but if you look at the boats, my boat is the boat in the foreground. The boats further along, if you look carefully, if you can see, none of them have any anchors. There's no anchors. Japanese boats don't carry anchors because Japanese sailors don't anchor. So there's very little anchoring in Japan. In fact, I've never anchored in Japan. In the 6 years that I cruised Japan, I never once anchored. For me, what makes Japan special is the people, the food, going to the hot spring baths, history, the culture. When I cruised BC and Alaska, I enjoyed anchoring and I enjoyed the nature, but being at anchor in beautiful bays is not that different from one country to the other. And when you can moor almost all places for free and you have access to all the things on land, I sort of thought, well, why anchor out when I can enjoy things on land? So I've never anchored in Japan, but there are in fact some really nice anchorage spots throughout Japan. And so if you really want to anchor, there's lots of anchoring as well. I mentioned that on the island of Tsuoshima, locals built me a dock. And this is the port, this is the fishing port at the bottom of this photo is where that dock was built for me. This is the little village where I lived. And you can see right center, there's a boat moored there. That's one of my clients' boats. They moored there and had a great time. Just above them, to the north of them, there's a hot spring bath. They took their dinghy over and had a hot spring bath and a delicious meal at the restaurant there. This is that same client boat moored in some islands off the west coast of Japan. So if one wants to anchor, there is a lot of anchoring in Japan, many well-protected spots. And there's many more things, just to whip through those, many more wonders of Japan. Japanese food is fantastic. So you can never get a bad meal in Japan, and it's actually quite cheap. I mentioned before, beautiful place to go with lots of the boat houses where the fishermen moored their fishing boats underneath the houses. A few of those have been converted to inns, and this is one inn where the restaurant is available for guests. And so I went there, had a delicious meal, fresh seafood overlooking the ocean. But again, wherever you go in Japan, there's great food and it's not expensive, and great sake and great beer. And talking about sake, you can get lots of great sake everywhere in Japan. This is a sake brewery with unusually a woman who was the president and her daughter. They actually have a dock where you can pull up on your boat and just walk into the shop and buy the sake. There are hot spring baths everywhere in Japan. This is yours truly soaking up an outdoor bath right by the ocean. But everywhere in Japan, there are baths. Japanese sailors typically judge the quality of a moorage spot by how close the bath is and how nice the bath is and how cheap the bath is. That's the number one criterion for Japanese sailors looking for places to moor. Japan is a great place for getting boat repairs and maintenance done. There are quite a few sailboats in Japan, but there are lots and lots of fishing boats. So any place that can repair fishing boats can also repair sailboats, except, of course, for the rigging, etc. Going up the northern part of Japan, it's a long story, but the short story is I hit a fishing boat and damaged my bowsprit here, the pulpit. And so I had to get that repaired. And so the next port up, they took off the frame, they welded a new frame So the welder kneeling on the boat pulled up to my bow did a great welding job, timing his welds for the waves coming in for the passing ferries. Did a great job welding the frame on better than ever. One of the things I really worried about was getting fuel in Japan, because there are very, very few fuel docks. Some of the marinas have fuel docks, but otherwise there's no fuel docks in Japan. So I imagined I was going to have to be carrying jerry cans back and forth to the gas station. But in fact, all the gas stations have these little tank trolley trucks that can come up to your boat as you're moored in a fishing port, and they deliver fuel to you. They're very careful and very conscientious. No extra charge for the delivery. So it's a great service. You can get fuel anywhere. Of course, there are a few challenges of cruising in Japan. It's not all great. There's no such thing as a perfect cruising ground. So I'll touch on a few of the challenges. There is a lot of shipping traffic in Japan. Everything that Japan imports comes by ship, and everything it exports goes out by ship. So here I am entering Tokyo Bay, and a cargo container ship cut right across my bow with not too much room to spare. Here's Silk Purse on my AIS screen, trying to go through a row of ships on their way to Nagoya. There's a lot of fishing boats that you have to watch out for. This is the Japanese fishing boat. This is a squid fishing boat, fishes at night, but there are fishing boats everywhere. A lot of them are on autopilot, not really keeping careful watch. So you have to keep watch for yourself of boats coming and going. There are also a lot of Chinese fishing boats in the waters around Japan, rust bucket fishing boats in the international waters near Japan. Here's Silk Purse heading southwest through the Ryukyu Okinawa Islands, and you can see all these Chinese fishing boats going hither and thither and yawing. And I was wing on wing at this point and trying to maneuver through the packs of Chinese fishing boats. Also, lots of fishing nets. You can see fishing nets all along the shore. One of the reasons why one should really not sail at night in Japan, or if one does sail at night, to go well offshore, because near shore there are lots of nets. Here's a screenshot, and you can see the nets marked in the red hatching here. And you'll see this is a lighthouse marking the entrance to a fishing port. I was actually heading this way through the fishing nets and aiming for this port entrance here, which looks pretty obvious and easy, except for one other challenge about cruising Japan is the fog. You get a lot of fog in northeast Japan in the summer, very, very thick fog. So this is the lighthouse where I was aiming for, and this is what that lighthouse looked like. And so I had to maneuver through those nets to find that lighthouse. So a combination challenge of the fishing nets plus the fog, and made it a bit nerve-wracking. Another challenge, typhoons. Typhoons going through Japan. There are more tropical storms in the Northwest Pacific than the rest of the world combined. So one does have to be wary about typhoons, but you normally know typhoon is coming 3 or 4 or 5 days in advance. The harbors are very, very well built with breakwaters everywhere and very well protected bays. So I've sat out 12 typhoons in Japan, and the only damage I had was one broken fairlead. The typhoons are there, you have to be careful, but they're manageable. So let me give you a bit now as we come to the end about how to cruise Japan, the paperwork. Clearance, same as any country, quarantine, customs, immigration, Coast Guard, etc. Not particularly difficult. You do have to give at least a 24-hour advance notice before you arrive. You can give advance notice weeks in advance before you leave your previous country. You need to get a closed port permit. Japan has a bad reputation for being very bureaucratic and requiring a lot of paperwork, but that is mainly because of the reputation around the closed port permit. And that the regulations have changed. So now it's very easy to get a permit. You can get a permit with a very simple one-page application, and the permit is valid forever. So the big hassle involving getting the permit, that closed port permit, is now solved and making cruising much easier. On the other hand, something more recent, one needs to do customs port entry, port exit permit paperwork in every port that you go to, big ports, small ports, whatever. If you can get a NICOSEN permit, NICOSEN registers your boat as a Japanese boat for customs purposes, that waives the requirement to do all the customs paperwork. But for some reason, over the last year or two, customs is being reluctant to issue a NICOSEN. If you can't get the NICOSEN, it makes the paperwork as you cruise Japan a bit more of a hassle. Visa, most nationalities can get a 90-day, short stay visa, and you can stay in Japan for a total of 180 days in a 365-day period. So a lot of cruisers will come for 90 days. They'll make a quick trip by plane or ferry to Korea to get another 90-day visa, so they cruise for 180 days. And they can do that for multiple years, really. You can leave your boat in Japan forever. So although you personally have to come and go based on your visa status, the boat can stay in Japan forever. My boat has been in Japan for 6 years. I know a Dutch couple that arrived in Japan 20 years ago on their boat. They still live on the boat. They're now permanent residents of Japan, and their boat is still a Dutch boat. They haven't changed the Japanese registration, no import duties, whatever. And there are no fees for anything. There's no cruising permit fees. There's no closed port permit fee, no NICOSEN permit fee, no fees for leaving your boats in Japan. So in that sense, it's a very easy place to cruise. Finally, let me talk about cruising routes in Japan. The standard route, of course, there's no limit to the number of routes where you go, but to give you some examples, the standard route is people who come in, they enter in southern Japan, and from the south here, and they arrive in Ishigaki or perhaps in Okinawa, and they cruise, and they arrive here in April, March, April. And they go up through the Ryukyu Islands, up the west coast of Kyushu, up the west coast of the main island of Honshu, up to Hokkaido. And then Hokkaido, Hakodate, Kushiro, and then on to Alaska. Ultimately, they could go up the Pacific coast to Alaska. The west coast, the Sea of Japan coast, is much better than the Pacific coast, but both are okay. And some people can go over the north of Japan, north of Hokkaido. Personally, I prefer this route. It's not very common. I think it's a better option. The time to leave from Hokkaido to go to Alaska is the first half of June. So it's basically a 3-month trip from the south to the north and to Alaska. That's a very quick trip. Japan's a big country. And so doing this in 3 months is really fast, particularly if you factor in weather windows and boat repairs and whatever. So it's doable, and a lot of people do it. That's the standard route. But I think it's a bit too rushed if you really want to appreciate Japan. So I recommend a 15-month plan. you arrive in the south, you go through the islands to Shikoku, through Kyushu, and into the Seto Inland Sea, and you cruise there. From Fukuoka, you can make a quick trip over to Korea to get your visa renewed, and then another 3 months here. So 6 months of cruising here, and then you leave your boat somewhere here for the winter. And then you go home or you go someplace warm for the winter, and then you come back the following spring, and you continue up, then leisurely 3 months of cruising up to Hokkaido and to Alaska. Or if you want to go south again, instead of Alaska, you can cruise Japan more leisurely and then go down south and back down to Southeast Asia, or you can go down to South Pacific or whatever. So that 15-month plan, I think, gives you a much better appreciation for Japan. You can experience much more about Japanese history and culture and friendly people. The other option, what I did, and I would recommend, is to do a circumnavigation of Japan, which takes at least 3 years if you want to do a circumnavigation. Of course, you can start the circumnavigation from anywhere and end from anywhere. But if you want to do a true circumnavigation, going around the northern, eastern, western, and southernmost points of Japan and returning to your starting point, there are many options. But here's what I did. I arrived from Honolulu, Hakodate. I went around Hokkaido. Hokkaido is the toughest part of cruising Japan, really. And then I went down along the west coast to Fukuoka, western Japan. And I left my boat there for the winter and went back to Canada. Following spring, I resumed my voyage and went straight down to the westernmost part of Japan, the southernmost part, and up through the Ryukyu Islands to Kyushu, along the southern shore of Shikoku and into the Seto Inland Sea, and left my boat there for the second winter. Went back to Canada again. Then the next spring, I returned and went up the Pacific coast and back to Hakodate. From there, I went back to Fukuoka and into the Seto Inland Sea to start living on that island with my private dock. But people could go from here, they could go to Alaska, or they could go down to South Pacific or whatever. Lots of options. But anyway, there's lots of different ways to cruise Japan, to experience its history and culture and get to know the people. Those are 3 possible options. But whatever route you take, wherever you go, I strongly recommend that you cruise Japan. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. Thank you for listening.
Oh, Kirk, thank you very, very much indeed. We seem to have got a bit of an echo on the line, but fantastic talk. Please, we've got some questions waiting for you. People want to. Just going to investigate the echo.
Okay, you sound fine from my side.
Okay.
I get the echo a lot when Simon is talking, and now that I'm talking.
Slightly curious about that one. I'm just going to close the door. I don't think it's coming from Sally's machine, but I'll just double check. Okay, thank you very much. The echo is gone. So a question from Judith for you. Judith, please go ahead.
Well, you almost answered it in the end. I was wondering how many nautical miles from north to south, and how many nautical miles in all?
Actually, I wrote that down. I think I might get that question here. From north to south, it's about 1,400 nautical miles. And so in European terms, it's like going from Oslo to Naples.
Okay.
And going from east to west, it's about 1,300 nautical miles, which is like going from London to Moscow. So it's a big country.
Yes, it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
You made a
In
great
North
case
America,
for going there.
I hope so. I hope you come. For anybody listening in North America, north to south is about the same as going from Montreal, Canada, to south of Miami, Florida.
Fantastic.
Just a question about language. You obviously speak Japanese, having lived there for a long time. How difficult would it be for someone without those language skills?
Yeah, I get that question a lot. It is more challenging in the sense that, you know, often sometimes the information you want to get is only in Japanese, and that makes it a bit more challenging. On the flip side, and of course, dealing with certain government officials and whatever, or dealing with, if you need boat repairs or whatever, that's sometimes more difficult. Having said that, two things. One, with Google Translate and similar services, a lot of people are finding now the language barrier is not that bad. And there are even machines in Japan that people carry around in their hands, that hand translators. So the technology is making it easier. And also, one of the interesting things that I've seen, because I speak Japanese and and people can figure out that I've been in Japan a long time, they often ignore me. A lot of cruisers that I've talked to, because they don't speak Japanese, the Japanese, you know, people, they want to make the foreigners feel welcome. So they go out of their way to, you know, show them around, to offer translation services if they're in trouble or whatever. I never got any such help. So partly it's a question of the individual personality of the person. I know some people have said to me, oh, the language barrier was too difficult. But most people who are used to cruising internationally, they are familiar with dealing with language issues, and that's just part of the reality of where they are. So I would say it's manageable. And with Google Translate and similar services now, it's much more easier than it was even 5 years ago.
Because I mean, there's the spoken language, and then I mean the chart extract you showed in one of the slides. That's you got all the Japanese characters on it. I mean, that's another issue.
Right. Well, yes, but the charts. So if you use CMAP or Navionics or whatever, that's all in English. That screenshot I showed you was from a Japanese charting software, which is what I use because it's actually better charts. But even, by the way, that particular Japanese charting software, foreigners use it. You know, it's fairly intuitive charting software. So once you've had a 1 hour lesson on it, you can actually, you don't have to be able to read the characters to be able to use the software. But yeah, it's a reality that people have to deal with. But, you know, I know people who arrived here, you know, and spoke zero or Japanese, and they ended up staying here 6, 8, 10 years. And someone managed to deal with the language, or the language was not significant enough to deter them from cruising Japan.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
Kirk, I just love the idea of turning up in a Japanese fishing village and meeting the mayor, who then builds you a private dock. Where in the world would that happen? That's extraordinary, fantastic. We've got a question from Michael Anand Hartshorn. Michael Anand, do you want to open your microphone and ask the question direct?
Can you hear it?
Yeah, loud and clear, Michael. Go ahead.
Did you ever write your cruising book?
No, it's in the works. It's the 3 charts I showed at the end of the cruising routes. Those are going into the book that I'm still working on. But I got delayed by more cruising, and then I got married, so that has delayed me a little bit more. But so I've actually decided to not. Initially, the plan was to be very ambitious and write the cruising Bible to Japan, and I realized I was a bit too ambitious. So I've scaled down my ambitions to write a more modest guide, at least as the first step, and then do revised editions as I go. So I'm hoping to get that, a simple edition out within a year or so.
Oh, good for you.
I've just got one question. I noticed that you said you travelled, you wanted to go and sail Japan, so you left from North America and went to Hawaii and then across to northern Japan. If you had the choice again, what route would you take from North America?
From where in North America?
Vancouver.
It's where our boat is at the moment.
Oh, okay. Up until 6 months ago, I would have said the route that I took. If you look at Jimmy Cornell's book, he will say it's not possible to go from, say, Vancouver to Japan in one season. And I was in correspondence with Jimmy Cornell and told him my plan to go Victoria to Hawaii and Hawaii to Japan in one season. And he said, well, I don't think it's really a good idea or possible, but let me know how it goes. And I did it. And as you saw, I couldn't do it in a season because I was concerned about typhoons in the second half. If everything goes smoothly, you have to leave Victoria or Vancouver earlier than what Cornell would recommend, and you have to leave Hawaii sort of later than he would recommend, and try to thread the needle. So if you do that, I think it's manageable. But interesting, a couple of boats have come via the north, basically from the Aleutians in northern Hokkaido, and I considered that myself when I was planning the voyage, and I thought it was lunacy. But I know of several boats who have done it, and I think it's now doable. But whether you can get, say, from Vancouver to, say, Japan in that one season is a challenge, because you have to go up the Inside Passage to Alaska through the Aleutians and down. So I guess the short answer is going from Vancouver to Japan in one season is going to be a challenge no matter which way you go. Probably the one that I did is still the best, but I think you can make the argument that arriving in the north from the Aleutians makes sense. Now, the one thing I would say about my passage, I went from Hawaii to northern Japan because I wanted to do the circumnavigation. I wanted to start in the north, go to the south, and back to the north again. And then I was going to go do the Aleutians back to Vancouver or Victoria. If I had not been planning the circumnavigation, if I just wanted to cruise Japan in general, get to the central Japan, for example, it would have been easier. I could have gone, instead of going northwest, more west from Honolulu and gone toward central Japan, Tokyo, Yokohama, which would have been, instead of a 37-day passage, would have been more like a 25-day passage, which probably would be more manageable.
Okay, interesting.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yes.
Sorry if that's a confusing answer.
No. Just look over the horizon. We hope to be there.
I'm looking forward to it.
How about going the other way from Japan back to Alaska or North America?
Yeah, so a lot of that's, as I said, the standard, that 3-month cruising route. That's for people who they're not really aiming for Japan. They're just Japan's on their way to get to Alaska is more the mentality. So they zip through Japan, and then they go to northern Japan, Hokkaido, and they leave from they'll leave from Kushiro and go to Alaska, and they tend to, so almost have, for weather reasons, they have to leave northern Japan by about June 15th.
Do you want to say something? Good.
And so they go to the Aleutians and Dutch Harbor and whatever.
Come on.
Certainly, there's no need to rush it with the prices of the marinas and dockage based at $1 a night. That sounds phenomenal, and no import tax. And why doesn't everybody go there? Sounds wonderful.
Yeah. If you want to leave your boat at a good marina over the winter, for my 40-foot, it's a 40-foot boat, about $400 US a month. You can find something maybe as cheap as 300 or up to 500, but roughly $1 a foot a month for to stay over the winter.
And
so cheaper than my marina in Canada.
Haul outs and things readily available, Kirk, if you need to scrub the bottom or change the anode or whatever.
Pardon me?
Haul out, you can get craned out or lifted, whatever.
Yeah, so there are good haul-out facilities. The bigger the boat, the fewer the haul-out facilities. A 40-foot boat, almost all haul-out facilities can handle a 40-foot, monohull. You get to 50 feet, there are fewer haul-out facilities, and so on. But yeah, there's a lot of haul-out facilities, and you could also hire divers to clean the boat or whatever.
Fantastic. Fantastic. I think Tony Vasey is keen to come in. Tony, go ahead.
Thank you very much, Kirk, for the presentation. Were you single-handed most of the way?
Yes, I've from the day I bought the boat, I've always been single-handed up until today. Yeah, it's always single-handing.
And now you've got a wife.
Yes, who doesn't sail. So actually, I've just sold my boat. I swallowed the anchor and sold my boat. Interestingly or ironically, my wife manages marinas. I met her at a marina, and her family business is the largest marina manager in Japan, but she doesn't sail. So I'm the house husband.
Well done. So you've got a wife. You haven't got a boat.
Don't have a boat, have a wife, and as of next week, have a 2-year-old foster daughter. So,
well done. Well done. Thank you very much.
So, that'll keep me busy.
Thank you, Tony and Jill. I think Pam, you've got a question for Kirk.
Thanks. Yes, I'm wondering, are there any options for chartering in Japan, Kirk?
The company that when I decided to swallow the anchor, I set up a company called Computer Consulting. And there's several, the first business of computer consulting is to support foreign cruisers. So I support, foreign cruisers, boats of all sizes. It doesn't have to be super yachts, by the way. It could be any, I've got clients as small as 35 feet and 60 feet and 110 feet. So I support foreign cruisers, clearance support, passage planning, making marina reservations, repair reservations, etc. But because of exactly your question, people who are sailors but they can't imagine sailing the boat all the way to Japan, I've now started chartering services as well. So the short answer is there have been no charter businesses in Japan until now. And I now have access to 2 large catamarans with bilingual skippers that I arrange charters for. And in the future, I'm planning on, if the global economy recovers from the coronavirus, planning on getting a small fleet of 40, 45-foot catamarans to do as a charter business.
That's great. Can you spell the name of the consulting for those of us that don't speak Japanese?
Yes, and please go to my website. The company name is Konpira, Konpira, Konpira Consulting.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
If you Google that, you'll see the cruiser support, the yacht charters. I also do kayak tours, etc. So happy to help anybody who wants to explore Japan's oceans.
Thank you.
I know Phil Heaton, I don't think he's got a question, but he's got a comment. Phil, come in.
Yeah, hi Kirk. I just wanted to say that your presentation was absolutely excellent. I like the structure, very informative, and I'm very glad that you didn't do we started here and then we went there and then we went there and then we went there. Yeah, really enjoyed it. And I think we might be a little bit late for going to Japan now, since we've done the circumnavigation and ended up back in the Mediterranean. But anyway, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it.
Have we got anybody else online who's actually cruised Japan or diverted north from a standard circumnavigation? Anybody online? Ah, they're all waiting to go there then. Obviously. I'm just going to open the microphone if anybody else wants to come in with any questions. We've been going for an hour and a quarter, which is a good spell. So has anybody got any questions? If not, we'll start a wind up.
Can I come in, Simon?
Yeah, please go ahead, Fee.
Thanks, Kirk. That was really great, and I hope everybody realises that you've set yourself up as the port officer for the OCC, and that you've got lots of good information on your port officers page on our website as well. So it's great that Compera Consulting is helping small boats as well as big boats, and we really appreciate your going to the effort to put all the information up on the website for us. So thank you very much.
My pleasure. And OCC members get special discounts and special service.
That's a good plug for all those listening who are not members of the OCC to sign up straight away. Thank you for that, Kurt.
And can use because I don't have a boat now, the dock that the town built for me is still my dock and now available for use for free by OCC members.
That is fantastic. I'm just blown away by a town that built a dock for its visitor. I wish that would happen elsewhere. But thank you very much, Kirk. Thank you very much. It's been a great morning for us, and I hope it's not too late for you in Japan. But we've really enjoyed your talk. We've got some more great talks coming. I was chatting with Ellen Massey Leonard yesterday in Hawaii, who's going to be talking about the Marquesas and the Tuamotus. Her talk is going to be just as stunning as the rest. We've got Pam, who's online at the moment, or she was, yep, she still is online, who's going to be talking about the Bahamas, and some real bumper talks towards the end. We've got the Barton Cup winner, Randall Reeves, going to be talking about his figure of eight circumnavigation of the world and the Americas. And a real coup d'etat at the end is the Bob Comley talk, talking about sailing with Tillman as a 17-year-old, which will be an extraordinary experience. We've invited the Alpine Club to participate in that one. So another 6 great talks to come, 6 great talks so far. And Kirk, thank you very much. Great talk. And it's been a pleasure going through the dress rehearsal with you. We learned so much about Japan just chatting with you a week or so ago. And we're certainly looking forward to getting there, perhaps by kayak before we get there by boat. But delighted to hear you've got a kayak outfitting business in that inland sea, which sounds fantastic.
We can combine the kayak tour and the charter.
Great. Kirk, thank you very much indeed. And thank you, everybody, for dialing in today. Thank you.